You're listening to Kentucky Running, presented by John's Run Walk Shop in Lexington. Help others find this show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing in your podcast app. This episode is sponsored by Curex Insoles.
What's up, runners? This is Matt Reno. Thanks for being patient with us. Took us a little extra time to get this Kentucky Running episode out. Along with some other members of the John's Run Walk Shop team, I was recently in Austin, Texas for the running event. It's an annual running industry conference where we get to meet with our vendors, find some awesome new products to bring into the store, run along the beautiful Austin Riverwalk, and even hang out with the Spy Belt Sloth. Check out the picture on our Instagram. The running event also features an award ceremony for the top 100 running stores in the country, and we at John's are honored to once again be among this group of stores, making a difference in our communities through running, walking, and all-around foot health. Thank you to our customers, especially those of you who nominated us, for helping make this possible. But now we're back in Lexington. It's good to be home. We're here just in time for Black Friday and Small Business Saturday. And yes, we are open today. No, you don't have to stand outside at 5 a.m. Go ahead, sleep late, get a good run in, then head to either of our stores for huge deals happening now through December 2nd. We've got sales on Curex insoles, Shox headphones, Blundstone boots, Smart Wool apparel, recovery products, and lots more. You can see the whole list at johnsrunwalkshop.com. Speaking of recovery, that's what we're talking about today. Kelsey Karnes, physical therapist from MoveSmart in Lexington, returns to the show to talk about strategies for avoiding injury and getting you back out there for your next run. We're going to talk about changing your recovery strategy based on the distances you're running, best time for foam rolling, and lots more on Kentucky Running. All right, I'm here with Kelsey Karnes, physical therapist at MoveSmart, and we are in the brand new facility. Kelsey, this place looks great. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. We're excited about it.
Yeah, it's really easy to find and quiet, relaxing place. So wish you all the best here.
Thank you.
By the way, you are our first repeat guest.
Awesome. That's exciting.
You were on our first episode. Is that right?
Yeah. No pressure, right? First episode.
No, not at all. Well, no, now you're a pro at this.
And first repeat guest, no pressure.
So we're talking about recovery today. And you just ran a trail race, right?
Yeah, I did the 10K this weekend that John's Run Walk sponsored. It was awesome. Super great race. Highly recommend to any runners out there listening. They had a 30K and a 50K option. I did not participate in anything more than the 10K. It was very challenging, but still like a super awesome race. To everybody who got out and raced this weekend, it was a perfect weather for it.
Yeah, it sure was. Yeah, well, great. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask, what are you doing now to recover from a challenging race like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the first thing, like immediate thinking about recovery is not just being like the next day or that same day, but recovery takes time. So immediately after, obviously considering like nutrition and hydration. So making sure you're replenishing in that. So I had protein, replenished with some protein to help muscle recovery and things like that. I took a day or two off from running afterwards and then went back into running workouts. I personally love active recovery. So for me, I went swimming the next day, even though my muscles are sore from like a race. Being able to like swim and still move and kind of work out some of that soreness is my preferred method of recovery. There's a lot of different options out there for people that I hope to chat about today.
I'm glad you mentioned active recovery because for a lot of runners, we want to get back out there as soon as possible.
Heck yeah.
But it's not always a great idea to do that. So first of all, let's back up a little bit and just talk about the benefits of recovery and why it's so important.
Yeah, that's great. So when you think about any type of exercise, whether that be running, whether that be strength training, whether that be cycling, swimming, whatever form of activity you're doing, anytime you're asking your muscles to undergo a higher than normal load, you're going to have some muscle breakdown. Muscles have to break down to rebuild. That's how people get stronger and their muscles get bigger, depending on the type of training you're doing. And so recovery is that period of time that balances that breakdown and that building. So if you just constantly broke your muscles down, let's say I ran a trail 10K every day for 30 days, my muscles are going to continually get broken down and broken down and broken down. But because I'm not allowing any time for recovery in between those efforts, I don't have that rebuilding. And so that can lead to injury. So recovery is very helpful to allow not only our muscles to rebuild like they need to, it also allows different blood levels of certain proteins and molecules to replenish after a hard workout. There's a lot of studies done that can show we actually have changes in a lot of different markers in our bloodstream after a hard effort. And so allowing a period of time for recovery can help those to kind of resume back to a normal level as well.
Do you see a lot of injuries where they probably could have been prevented had they spent more time on recovery?
Yeah, for sure. I treat a lot of runners, and I see it a lot with running just because most of us who run love running. And I mean, I speak for myself in saying I love running way more than I love other forms of cross training. So my goal in cross training is to get myself back to running as soon as possible. And so a lot of other people that I see are like that as well. And yes, there's a lot of injuries that can be attributed to a lack of recovery. Injuries like shin splints, a lot of times things like, and now recovery is not the only reason people get these things, but a lot of times if you're adding a high load to your body of running or something similar where your feet are hitting the pavement or the ground, and you do that over and over and over again without time to recover, you can get things like shin splints, stress fractures, little aches and pains here and there. So yeah, definitely a common thing that I see.
How does it affect long-term performance too? Because I feel like a lot of us runners, we kind of think in the short term, even if we're planning for races way ahead of time, we're just thinking, okay, this week I've got to get this many miles, and today I've got to run this speed, and we're not totally thinking about how that's going to affect our body over the long haul. And so how does recovery factor into long-term performance and preventing burnout?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So recovery is going to be key for your long-term performance. And burnout, I'll speak on that as well. Like too much of any good thing is going to lead to burnout, right? Like if you do too much running, even though you love running, and it becomes a chore for you to do it, you're going to get burnout, right? But running is key for long-term performance and for you to be able to run for the long haul. And that's my goal for all of my patients, is to teach them what are things that you can do now to help you 15 years from now with your running. And recovery is huge because if you do, a lot of injuries are just short-term, but some aren't. If you are overloading joints, you can have permanent changes to them, and you can have permanent changes to bone and cartilage and muscle and tissue. And so even though an injury, a lot of injuries are just kind of a short-term 6 to 12-week rehab thing, there are longer-term effects that can happen with those injuries.
Do you recommend differences in recovery time or recovery strategy between distance runners versus people who are running shorter distances at more intense speeds?
Yeah. So I actually did some research on this before coming to speak on this today, because I wanted to see kind of what the most recent stuff out there said. So what we're seeing is that the longer distance racers, so like half marathon, marathon runners, don't benefit as much from an active recovery of running. For example, if you ran a half marathon tomorrow, and then you decided, okay, well, I'm going to then recover. I'm going to go on just like a short, like 20, 30 minute run later that day. So like maybe tomorrow afternoon, if you ran in the morning, tomorrow afternoon. What we're seeing is for sprinters, that might be great. Like if you did a sprinting race in the morning or like a track workout or something in the morning, and then you just did like a chill kind of recovery run in the afternoon, that might work really great for active recovery. If you did a distance race that morning, then doing another run in the afternoon to recover can actually be more harmful. So for distance runners, like half marathon, marathon, when we get into those kinds of distances, choosing different activities that's not running to help you recover is more beneficial than if you're doing shorter distance running. Does that make sense?
It does. Can you go into a little more of the why that is?
Yeah. So it a lot of it has to do with the amount of load you're putting on the body and the way you're putting it on the body. So if you think about, and I'm going to speak in terms of road running because that's what a lot of the evidence is done on. But if you think about a half marathon or a marathon on the road, you're putting a lot of the same load on your body over and over and over again for a pretty long period of time. And so the body doesn't love the same load repetitively for a long time. So then if your way of recovering is to then do that same load for another period of time, it's not going to be happy with that. Whereas if you're doing shorter distance runs and you're doing more speed work, you're now changing the load on your body, while running fast and like sprinting is going to put a higher level of muscular effort into the system, and it's going to put a higher load onto the bone. That's very different than I'm just going to do kind of a chill, relaxing zone 2 type run. having the variability in training is key. And that's why I recommend to most of my runners when they're choosing active recovery strategies, and by active recovery, just meaning like not just resting. Active recovery meaning you're doing a type of activity to help you recover before your next run. I recommend them choosing different sports to do other than running. Even though a lot of people can get away with just doing like a 15-20 minute jog after a race to kind of recover, there isn't a lot of evidence that supports that that's actually good for the body. And so I encourage people to choose other things like swimming or cycling or going for a walk or doing a hike or things like that as your form of active recovery.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about rest days. How essential are they in a training schedule? Let's say you're training long-term for a half marathon, something like that. Should you schedule in one per week? Do you go by feel? What are your thoughts on rest days?
Yeah, so that's a really loaded question. My short answer is it depends. That's like every physical therapist's short answer, you know. My longer answer is that it's super determined by a lot of different variables. So if you're in a training block where your goal is to train pretty consistently every day to like build and build and build and build and build, and you're doing just the same type of activity. So example, if you're running like 6 days a week, it's going to be pretty good to have a rest day where you're not running. That's a lot of load. It's not going to, there are some elite athletes that have trained to work up to being able to run 7 days a week, but that's a small percentage of people. For the average runner, running 7 days a week is not going to be good for your body. But a rest day doesn't have to mean you're just sitting on the couch. You can, but actually when we look at the evidence, it shows that just kind of resting on the couch is not necessarily the best form of recovery for a lot of athletes. It's actually better if you go out and do some other type of endurance activity like cycling, swimming, walking, yoga, active mobility, that kind of stuff. Rest days are very beneficial, but they don't have to mean you're just laying on the couch. Now, if you are an elite athlete who has trained themselves to be able to run 7 days a week and you've slowly built up to that, then you may not need as much rest time as other people do. But even elite athletes, you'll hear them talk about taking naps during their day, having additional sleep during hard training blocks. So rest is important for everybody, regardless of skill level.
Kentucky Running is sponsored by CureX insoles, available at John's Run Walk Shop. If you're a runner or any other kind of athlete, of course, you want to prevent injuries. An easy way to do that is with a pair of insoles. When you run, you're exerting up to 3 times your body weight on your feet and joints. CureX insoles reduce that stress on your joints. Less pressure on your body means decreased pain and increased performance. CureX Run Pro insoles are supportive, but also soft and flexible. They don't take up a ton of room in your shoes. They give you support without you noticing them throughout your run. And they help manage moisture to keep your feet and shoes fresh. They come in 3 profiles, high, medium, and low, to fit your individual arch type. So next time you're in John's Run Walk Shop, ask us to check out your arches and your knee alignment so we can help you find the right pair of CureX Run Pro insoles for you. Learn more at johnsrunwalkshop.com/insoles. Let's talk about some of your favorite recovery strategies. What do you often recommend to your patients?
I always tell my patients to figure out what works best for their body, which is hard that I don't have just like a, here, do this exact thing after your run to remain injury free.
Yeah, why not? That's what we
Right,
came to for.
I know, right? That would be like so easy and simple. It would be great. But in all reality, the same strategy doesn't work for everybody. So I like to give people a variety of options and let them try different ones and see what they think. So for example, I have a lot of patients that love cold water immersion. So they'll do the cold plunge. I don't know, Matt, how you feel about the cold plunge.
Terrible.
Have you done the cold plunge?
I did it once as a fundraiser, and that's it. I don't do that for fun.
Same. The idea of plunging myself into cold water, especially after a workout, sounds terrifying. Like I love nothing more than a hot shower, but I have a lot of patients that choose to do that. So that can be one recovery strategy.
And how does that work?
So there's a lot of different research being done on it because it's kind of like it's not necessarily new. Like we've been seeing athletes do this for a while. But what happens is when you immerse a muscle, or ice too is another example, but when you put cold onto an area of the body, it's going to help to decrease inflammation in that area. It can help with post-workout muscle soreness. And it just kind of changes what's happening underneath the skin in that area. So it changes what's happening on a molecular level to the muscle. So you can do it like in a cold plunge where people like submerge their whole body into like a cold bath. You can use an ice pack to areas. I've seen people just put their legs into like cold water after a run. What we see is now, if you do that every single time, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. If you're doing that after every single workout, it can actually hinder long-term performance. I recommend it for a lot of my people who are doing back-to-back day performance activities. For example, if you're running like a race series where you've got like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday race, we've seen that it can actually be really beneficial to do something like cold water immersion, or even just like taking an ice bath. I mean, that's basically cold water immersion. But doing something like that in between the days, and it can actually help your muscles to recover faster so that they can perform at a high level the next day. Another option that a lot of my patients do that doesn't necessarily have a lot of great evidence behind it is foam rolling. So a lot of people, I mean, I do it too. I think it feels good. I love it. When we look at the evidence on it, there's not a lot of really positive evidence that says that foam rolling after a run is going to drastically change your muscles' ability to recover. Now, we do have evidence that says that it can reduce soreness and it can reduce your level of perceived fatigue. But as far as actually changing what's happening in the muscle itself, as far as its recovery, not a huge change in what's happening with foam rolling or not foam rolling. I actually have a lot of my people foam roll prior to a workout. There's actually more evidence to support doing a foam rolling session right before you go on a run.
Okay.
I know. I didn't know that for years, and I read a lot of research on this and have seen a lot of running coaches having people do that. Even in preparing for this, did some research on it. There's a lot more positive benefits of foam rolling prior to your run and your workout rather than just after, on range of motion, flexibility, explosibility, those kinds of things.
Would you just go straight into the foam rolling, or would you warm up and stretch a little bit first?
I mean, you could. I'm always a big fan of warming up. I mean, I think I talked about this last time you had me on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm always a big fan of like doing a little walk or something to kind of warm everything up, get some blood flowing. So in my world, I would always recommend do some of that first and then foam roll and then go on your run. But that's not to say that everybody needs to foam roll before a run. I don't by any means tell all of my patients to do that, but it can be a helpful strategy for improving muscle flexibility and soreness and those kinds of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard about that kind of research yet, but I'm still going to keep foam rolling after my runs because it feels great.
Heck yeah. I couldn't find any negative research on it, but I did find that interesting to see that there was actually more positives to before versus after.
Anything else?
I mean, my biggest thing that I tell people to do for recovery is hydrate and fuel yourself well. There's so much evidence. I know you've had people on the podcast talking about this before as well. There's just so much really important evidence that the way we fuel our body, whether that's with liquid, whether that's with food, whether that's getting the proper amount of protein, carbs, fat, water, all of those things is essential to our recovery. I would say that is probably the thing I talk about the most with people. Hey, make sure you're fueling well to support the physical exertion that you're doing. In addition to, if you want to foam roll after a run, if you want to do some active recovery, like go swimming or ride a bike, those are the kind of things that I would maybe push people more towards versus passive recovery, which is just like resting and not doing anything. We've all done that, right? Like I'm sure you've gone on a run and then been like, oh my gosh, I'm so sore. I'm so tired. I'm just going to like lay on the couch the next day. And then you get up and try to walk after you've been on the couch the next day and you're like, oh gosh, this was a mistake, Because
like your muscles tense up.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of active recovery in the form of something other than running, as well as just fueling well. And then supplementing with whatever interventions you like, whether that be your foam roller, cold water immersion, massage gun, infrared sauna. There's all kinds of hot button recovery options out there for people.
Your fueling, nutrition, that's something you should really be planning in advance, not necessarily
Absolutely.
treating reactively, right?
Yes,
I'm
for
sure
sure.
a lot of runners will just be like, oh, I'm starving. I'm just going to eat whatever's available.
Yes.
But it would probably be more beneficial if they thought about it beforehand.
Absolutely. Yeah. So preparing ahead of time, consulting with someone who's a professional in that area. As a PT, my training is not in nutrition. I know some of that, but it's not my primary form of training. There's a lot of people out there that is their thing. And so consulting with, if you're not sure how to prepare for that or how to recover well from a fueling standpoint, meeting with someone who that's what they do, and it can really make a significant difference in your ability to perform athletically.
By the way, if you're looking for some more nutrition tips, we interviewed a nutritionist, Kayla Dudick, on the podcast a few episodes ago. So go back and listen to that. What's the difference between pain that signals a need for rest and just typical soreness? How can runners tell the difference?
We've all felt that sensation of I went on a hard run and then the next day it's like, oh my gosh, my hamstrings or my quads or my calves, like everything is so sore. I feel like a ton of achiness in my legs. That kind of pain is normal after a hard effort workout. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to ignore it and like go do another hard workout on top of that muscle soreness, but to some extent, that's to be expected, right? It's whenever we start to have sharp, pinpointed discomfort that doesn't really go away with rest and that could keep us up at night or feels like it kind of radiates out of like the area that it originates in. That's when we start to get concerned that like, that could possibly be an injury and more than just post-workout soreness. I'll use an example. Let's say you went on a run and you were feeling just some soreness after your run, kind of in your hips and in like your glute area, bottom side of your hip area. And after you do some active recovery or maybe you iced it, maybe you did some foam rolling, or maybe you kind of took a walk the next day, it slowly kind of went away. Awesome. That's probably not an injury. If you did those things and it continued to get worse, even when you took away the stimulus of running, that should start to like ping runners' brains as, there could be something going on here that's just not muscle soreness. Same if it's like a sharp pain. Muscle soreness from exercise is not sharp in nature. Okay, so if you're feeling like sharp stabbing pains, that should kind of signal you to think injury. And then the third thing is pain that's greater than like a mild intensity. So I use the pain scale 0 to 10. 10 is like you're going to the ER. If you're experiencing pain that's more than 3 out of 10 consistently after a run, that's a little bit alerting that something deeper might be going on.
Do you have any recovery strategies for busy runners who have limited time, just some quick things they can do when they can?
You don't have to have a ton of time to recover well. So planning out your workouts for the week, it can be like the biggest thing. So thinking about what you want to achieve in a week from working out perspective and planning that out can be really key to your recovery. That's literally not adding anything extra to your day. It's just asking you to think about, I know I want to run 4 times this week. How can I plan that out so all 4 days aren't back to back to back to back to back? For some people. Now, other people you can train yourself to be totally good to go with that, and that's totally fine. But for people who are concerned about, I know that if I run back to back, it can like irritate things in my body, or I might not feel great, or I might feel really sluggish by that 4th day, then plan out your week and figure out how can I schedule in days where maybe I do something different. So instead of using my time to go run, I go for a walk, or I go swim, or I cycle, or I do like a yoga workout. We're in the age of YouTube. You can find all kinds of stuff on there for recovery. So planning and scheduling is the number one thing. The number 2 thing is it really doesn't take that long to mix up a protein shake, right? So like that is another really key thing that I tell people, especially if they're busy and they're like, hey, I don't have time to think about doing like mobility and stuff like that. Okay, well then mix up a protein shake because like that's going to actually help repair your muscle from a cellular level. That's honestly the easiest thing you can do. And then I encourage people just to not do nothing. Just sitting and doing nothing after a hard workout is probably not going to help your recovery effort. So anything other than that is going to be more beneficial than just sitting and doing nothing.
And what advice would you give new runners who are building their workout routine about putting recovery in there? Anything different that they would consider as opposed to experienced runners?
Dialing back to what I'd said earlier is you can train yourself to not need as much recovery as maybe you once did when you started running. So as a newer runner, scheduling in more days in between your runs can be more beneficial at first before progressing to that, like I'm going to run each day of the week kind of situation, or like I'm going to run 4 days back to back and then take my rest break. If you're starting out to running, it can be a lot more beneficial to schedule your runs like in every other day or scheduling 2 days in between your runs. And then as you get more comfortable with running and as, maybe let's say 4 to 6 weeks of that goes by and you're feeling good, then maybe you back that down and you only give yourself 1 day in between your runs. And then maybe you back that down and you run 2 days back to back. So it's just a slow kind of steady build. But if you're starting out, scheduling more days in between runs is going to serve you much better in the long haul. And then as you're a more experienced runner, see what your body tells you. So if you run back to back to back to back to back days and you feel like trash, can't get out of bed, you're so achy, you can barely touch your muscles. I mean, we've all been there, right? Like you're so sore. It's like if I touch my quad, I'm going to crumble. So just listen to your body as you get to become more of an experienced runner and figure out what works for you. So I know for me, I don't like to run more than 2 days back to back. My body just doesn't like it. So I plan my week accordingly to be able to achieve that.
Especially good advice as we get closer to the new year and people want to
yes.
start running. Don't just start with 6-7 days a week.
Yes, please no.
We want you to keep running.
Yes.
Not say screw this and then quit after 2 weeks.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, thinking about the beginning of the year for sure.
Is there any other research you want to share with us on recovery?
Yeah, I mean, just not necessarily research, but just some encouragement to people. It can feel really overwhelming when you think about all the things you should and need to do to stay healthy with hobbies like running. All of us just want to run and not think about it. Most of us enjoy running because we can turn our brains off. I just want to encourage you, if that's you and it feels overwhelming, just thinking about these things like, how do I recover well? How do I fuel well? How do I schedule my mileage? Just listen to your body and know that everybody's unique and that one thing that fits one person doesn't mean it has to fit you. And so figuring out ways to just easily incorporate some things we've talked about today is what's going to work best for each person. And knowing that that doesn't have to look the same as your other running friends or the other people in your running club. And just knowing that listening to your body is still the best thing you can possibly do.
Kelsey, once again, thank you for sharing so much excellent advice with our listeners. Where can they learn more about MoveSmart?
You can follow us on social media at MoveSmartKY. We have Instagram and Facebook. They can also go to our website at MoveSmartKY.com or give us a call at 859-215-8870.
Thank you to Kelsey from MoveSmart for talking recovery. I hope you're already building ample recovery time into your workout routine. If not, take some of the tips you heard from Kelsey and figure out which ones work best for you. I'm Matt Reno. Thanks for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe on your podcast app. That helps a lot. And once again, please visit johnsrunwalkshop.com to see all the awesome sales we have going on right now. Instead of doing your holiday shopping online or at a big box store, why not keep your dollars local? John's Run Walk Shop has something for everyone on your list. We look forward to seeing you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon on Kentucky Running.